My dream is that to see Muslims, Christians, Jews, and people of faith work together to create a compassionate neighborhood.
I had no desire to work with Muslims. I was raised in a bubble, and I thought all Muslims hated Christians.
I'm going to be honest with you. I have not worked with evangelical Christian before until I met Bob Roberts.
I found a man who loved God. God was not just a theological construct. He was a personal entity to Majid.
Sometimes in order for you or for a person to change the world, you have to take risk.
I still remember my first meeting with Pastor Bob Roberts and Imam Muhammad Majid at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. in early 2015. At that breakfast, we planned to host a gathering in Doha, a conference, and a workshop. We called it Ambassador of Peace. It was held in 2015. That conference was organized on 13 to 16 June 2015 at the center. And it was attended by leading imams, priests, and pastors from the US, Pakistan, and Qatar. The goal of that meeting is very important, was to discuss how religious leaders, imams, pastors, and priests can play an important role in peace building, promote a culture of peace and reconciliation, and help make their countries a better place to live.
When I became friends with Muslims, I just assumed everybody would be excited and everybody would jump in, especially imams. Not at all. Not at all. Many pastors got upset. What are you doing? You're humanizing the Muslims, the imams. You're making people feel comfortable with them. We lost hundreds of church members from our church.
He took risk against Islamophobia and hate toward Muslims, but that's not having to change his mind. Continue in this path of bringing people together. Jesus didn't have it easy. Moses didn't have it easy. Muhammad didn't have it easy. Abraham did not have it easy. Why am I thinking they're going to have it easy?
The Ambassadors of Peace conference was a brilliant idea, an astonishing meeting, and really an amazing event. Perhaps it was the first of its kind. One of its remarkable discussions was how can we set a model that can be adopted in America and Pakistan to create closer relationships and build trust between the Christian majority and the Muslim minority in the US and the Muslim majority and the Christian minority in Pakistan. So I got to know these two gentlemen and we became closer. We continued to communicate after the event and build a strong relationship between our organizations. So the Ambassadors of Peace conference that was held in Doha almost 8 years ago was the first step towards the 2023 event. As the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
You know, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Naimi is a friend of mine. When we asked him to host the first retreat, his center was a great organization to host that retreat.
It was incredible because the walls were coming down, and all of a sudden there was the potential we could stand up for one another, we could watch out for one another. Without Doha, there never would have been a Multi-Faith Neighbors Network.
I think now, by going back to Doha, we're going back to where we started.
It was DICID and Dr. Al-Naimi who took the biggest risk with us. It was just an idea that we had. And I will always, forever be grateful to Dr. Al-Naimi and Qatar because they saw the potential And with no proof of concept, they said, try it here.
We appreciate all the effort they have done to facilitate, especially interfaith dialogue. They're pioneers. They're among the first who to establish a center of interfaith dialogue.
I'm glad that this extraordinary meeting is still remembered by my two friends, Bob Roberts and Imam Muhammad Majid, and I'm pleased that they brought us back to this beautiful memory. Now, the story behind today's conference stems from the continuation of discussions and communications built at the Ambassadors of Peace Conference in 2015 to continue our efforts to spread the culture of peace, building further to cover more countries that face the same challenges. I believe the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network came into existence as a result of this wonderful meeting and many other ideas and initiatives that followed, including this event today entitled From Religious Freedom to Religious Responsibility, Building Communities of Advocacy and Action, which explains Bob's words when he said, without Doha, there would never be Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, and gives sense to what Imam Majid's statement when he said, I think now, by going back to Doha, we go back to where we have started.
If the minorities can be persecuted anywhere and it's okay and the persecutors get away from it, then every religion is going to be threatened, in part because every religion is a minority somewhere. No longer can we make the same mistakes that we've made before. This time it counts.
We've now completed retreats in 15 cities. We have work in 20 cities. Our goal in the United States is to get all the way up to 50 cities, so we're working towards that. In addition to that, people like Qatar, the Templeton Foundation, the El Hebri Foundation, many others have come along beside us. I want to thank Dr. Al Naimi, DICID. I want to thank Qatar, Emir. I want to thank the people of Qatar for being the people that you are.
There's about 2 billion Christians, 1.7 billion Muslims. Imagine if we get along. Just imagine, in every corner of the world we get along. What kind of world will look like? That is a miracle. Changing heart.
The Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue and the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network are pleased, really, to welcome you all to participate in this event and wish each and every one of you a pleasant stay and fruitful discussions. And have a great day.
الحمد لله الواحد الأحد، والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد المبعوث رحمة للعالمين بالهداية والرشد، وعلى إخوانه من الأنبياء والمرسلين، وبعد. إنه بالرغم من كل الأزمات والمشكلات التي تحيط بعالمنا، إلا أن الجهود القطرية لنشر وتعزيز ثقافة التعايش والسلام والأمن في العالم تمضي وبحمد الله بوتيرة عالية. وقد كانت لغة الحوار اللغة الأمثل بل الوحيدة التي ارتأتها دولة قطر للتغلب على كافة المشكلات الناتجة عن الاختلاف الذي يتحول في كثير من الأحيان إلى صراع وتصادم يؤججه التطرف والغلو ورفض الآخر، مما يحتم علينا السعي الجاد في كل سبيل لإيجاد روح السلام بين كافة البشر على اختلاف أجناسهم ودياناتهم، والاتفاق على قيم إنسانية مشتركة تهدف للتعايش والتسامح والتعاون والسلام، وقبول الآخر والاعتراف بحقوقه وحريته الدينية والمدنية. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الوزراء والسفراء وعلماء الدين، السادة الحضور الكرام، نحييكم بتحية الإسلام، وتحية الإسلام السلام، فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ونعلن بكم ومعكم انطلاق فعاليات مؤتمر من الحرية الدينية إلى المسؤولية الدينية نحو بناء مجتمعات التضامن والإنجاز، وخير ما نستهل به آيات عطرة من القرآن الكريم يتلوها علينا القارئ الشيخ الدكتور يحيى بطي النعيمي، فليتفضل مشكورا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنا أوحينا إليك كما أوحينا إلى نوح والنبيين من بعده، وأوحينا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وعيسى وأيوب ويونس وهارون وسليمان، وآتينا داود زبورا، ورسلا قد قصصناهم عليك من قبل ورسلا لم نقصصهم عليك، وكلم الله موسى تكليما، رسلا مبشرين ومنذرين لئلا يكون للناس على الله حجة بعد الرسل، وكان الله عزيزا حكيما. لكن الله يشهد بما أنزل إليك أنزله بعلمه والملائكة يشهدون، وكفى بالله شهيدا. صدق الله العظيم.
والآن اسمحوا لي بدعوة سعادة الأستاذ الدكتور إبراهيم بن صالح النعيمي، رئيس مجلس إدارة مركز الدوحة الدولي لحوار الأديان، لإلقاء الكلمة الافتتاحية للمؤتمر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وإخوانه من الأنبياء والمرسلين. ضيوفنا الكرام، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، أصحاب الفضيلة والسماحة والغبطة والنيافة، سعادة الوزراء والسفراء، القادة الدينيون والعلماء والباحثون من أتباع الديانات السماوية الثلاث، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أرحب بكم أجمل ترحيب في مدينة الدوحة، متمنيا لكم قضاء أوقات طيبة تملؤها المحبة وتظللها الأخوة والإنسانية ويكسوها العلم النافع والخير لكم وللناس أجمعين. وأشكركم في مشاركتنا هذا المؤتمر الذي إن شاء الله ستجدونه جادا في تناوله وطرحه ومميزا في اختيار عناوينه وموضوعاته. الأخوة والأخوات الأفاضل، إن الدين الإسلامي هو دين سلام ومحبة وتآخي ورحمة، ودولة قطر لم تألو جهدا في الدعوة للسلام وترسيخ ثقافة الحوار مع جميع الثقافات وبين أتباع الأديان والانفتاح على الحضارات الأخرى، وتؤكد دوما على كفالتها لتعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان بما في ذلك حرية الدين والمعتقد، وتعزيز الحماية الدستورية لذلك. وكما تعلمون أن هناك العشرات من الجنسيات والأديان يتعايش بعضها البعض في دولة قطر بكل أريحية، والكل يمارس عبادته بحرية وتفاهم وأخاء بين المواطنين والمقيمين. وهذه أيضا رسالتنا في مركز الدوحة الدولي لحوار الأديان. وعبر سنوات طويلة ومشاريع عديدة من التعاون مع القادة الدينيين ومراكز الحوار العالمية والعلماء والمفكرين وقادة الفكر، حيث نسعى جاهدين لمد سور التلاقي والعمل المشترك بين كافة أطراف الحوار والمناقشة حول التحديات التي تحول دون العيش المشترك والتعايش السلمي بين أتباع الأديان والثقافات، لتعم ثقافة الحوار وثقافة السلام بين بني البشر. ويعد مؤتمركم هذا مثالا لهذا التعاون الدولي لمركز الدوحة مع المؤسسات والمراكز الدولية، وثمرة لعمل جاد وجهد متواصل ومخلص بين المركز وبين شبكة جيران بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، والتي نتشرف بالتعاون معها. وأخص بالذكر أخي القس باب روبرتس، وأخي الإمام محمد ماجد، والحاخام ديفيد سبرستين، فلهم مني كل الحب والتحية والتقدير، وللعمل الجاد والمبذول من طرفهم شخصيا ومن فريق العمل معهم للإعداد لهذا المؤتمر من أجل التهيئة لتأسيس رؤية واضحة حول قضية الحرية الدينية، انطلاقا من المسؤولية الدينية علينا جميعا على مختلف الأصعدة لمواجهة أمواج العنصرية والاضطهاد التي يعاني منها إخوان لنا في الإنسانية. وأنتم جميعا شركائنا كل واحد منكم، لأنكم تشكلون النخبة التي تستطيع تحمل مثل هذه الأمانة. وإني لا أرى في تجمع هذه الوجوه الطيبة أمامي فرصة عظيمة يلتقي فيها كوكبة من الأئمة والقساوسة والحاخامات وعلماء الدين، وأيضا القانونيين والأكاديميين والباحثين على أساس من القيم الدينية والإنسانية الثابتة. حضور الكرام، إن الحرية الدينية جزء لا يتجزأ من الدين، وهذا المبدأ أساسا في الدين الإسلامي وأمر إلهي في كل تعاملات المسلمين مع غيرهم. يقول الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم: لا إكراه في الدين. ويقول الله عز وجل مخاطبا نبيه محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم: ولو شاء ربك لآمن من في الأرض كلهم جميعا أفأنتم تكرهون الناس حتى يكونوا مؤمنين. فالناس كلهم جميعا يجمعهم أصل واحد، ويشتركون بكرامة وحقوق وواجبات، وإن اختلفوا في الدين أو العرق أو اللون أو الجنس. وكما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن أباكم واحد وأن ربكم واحد، كلكم لآدم وآدم من تراب، إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. ويقول: لا فضل لعجمي على عربي ولا لعربي على عجمي إلا بالتقوى. حضور الكرام، إن الحرية الدينية تشكل أساساً أخلاقياً ثابتاً ومبدأ إنسانياً راسخاً يرسم الطريق الصحيح نحو إقامة التعايش السلمي بين أتباع الأديان والحضارات، والتي من دونها تضطرب العلاقات الإنسانية، ويتحول المجتمع الإنساني إلى ساحة لإراقة الدماء وقمع الأقليات وممارسة أبشع صور الاضطهاد الديني، كما رأينا للأسف في عالمنا المعاصر في مختلف صور الاضطهاد للأقليات، وخاصة الأقليات الدينية وبالذات المسلمة. ولنا أمثلة عدة في العديد من دول العالم مثل ماينمار والهند، وحديثا للأسف نراها في السويد وفي ألمانيا. وأما في القدس الشريف فكأن اقتحامه والاعتداء على المصلين فيه وانتهاك حقهم في العبادة وممارسة شعائرهم الدينية بات ممارسة معتادة لا تجد فيها حسيبا ولا رقيبا. كل ذلك يوجب علينا وقفة جادة لمواجهة مثل هذه الانتهاكات والتصدي لها، ليس فقط بالشجب والإدانة وهو مطلوب، وإنما الأهم أن يطلع القادة الدينيين وعلماء الدين بالقيام بدورهم ومسؤولياتهم، فهم مطالبون اليوم أكثر من أي وقت مضى ليتضامنوا فيما بينهم ويتخذوا خطوات جريئة وعملية للتصدي لكافة الممارسات العنصرية والاضطهاد وقمع الحريات، وتأسيس رؤية واحدة تقوم على السلام والمحبة ونبذ العنف والتطرف. كما يجب على الدول في دساتيرها والحكومات في ممارساتها أن تحمي الحرية الدينية وأن تمنع كل القيود عليها، وأن تتصدى لكل صور التمييز والقمع والاضطهاد الديني، وكذلك وبنفس الدرجة ينبغي التصدي لكافة صور ازدراء الأديان وانتهاك المقدسات بزعم الحرية الفكرية. ومن جانب آخر فإن المسؤولية الدينية عند المؤمنين بحق تفرض عليهم الدفاع عن حق الحرية الدينية لكل إنسان، لأنه حق وهبه الله لكل إنسان دون تمييز أو إكراه. الإخوة والأخوات الكرام، إن منصات ومؤتمرات الحوار ليست منابر لإعادة تشكيل الأديان والشرائع والعقائد، وهي كذلك ليست لتغيير الأديان أو وحدتها، بل للتعارف والتعايش والوقوف على القواسم المشتركة وتحقيق الانسجام والتعددية والتسامح. فهي لا تعني صهر الأديان في قالب واحد جديد أبداً، وإنما هي فرصة للالتقاء وطرح الرؤى واستيعاب الفكر الآخر. وإذا كان حق الحرية الدينية يجعل المرء إنسانا مستقلا مسؤولا يقرر بنفسه ما يعتقده وما يهديه إليه قلبه وعقله من غير تسلط سلطة تقهره أو بطش يؤذيه، فإن الأديان السماوية تملك من الغنى الروحي والسمو الأخلاقي ما يجعلها المنبع الأول لذلك الحق، بل المؤسس له والسابق على جميع القوانين والمواثيق الدولية وحتى النظريات الإصلاحية والتصورات الفلسفية. ولا يفوتني في ختام هذه الكلمة أن أشكر كل من ساهم في تنظيم هذا المؤتمر، بدءا باللجنة الدائمة لتنظيم المؤتمرات، فلهم منا كل الشكر على جهودهم الكبيرة، وجميع أعضاء اللجنة المنظمة للمؤتمر من مركز الدوحة الدولي لحوار الأديان وشركائنا في شبكة جيران على ما بذلوه من جهد وإخلاص في تنظيم هذا المؤتمر. والشكر موصول لكم جميعا لما بذلتموه من تحمل عناء السفر وما تركتموه من مهام أخرى في عملكم، وما ستقدمونه من نتاج فكري وأوراق عمل جادة ومثمرة إن شاء الله. وأتمنى لكم جميعا كل التوفيق، وأن تكلل أعمالكم بالنجاح لما فيه خير الإنسانية وصلاحها وسلامتها. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
والآن مع كلمة القس بوب روبرتس المؤسس المشارك لشبكة الجيران متعددة الأديان، فليتفضل مشكورا.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. Are you? I'm excited that you made the trip. Give yourself a hand. You came from all over the world. Dr. Al-Naimi and I are just two preacher's kids trying to stay out of trouble. His father was an imam, my dad is a pastor, and we want to make a difference in the world. And so we are excited to be here today with you. So thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time and making this a priority. I want to say thank you to Dr. Al-Naimi. I'm very serious when I say that I love him, I care about him, he matters to me. Me and Majid got him a pair of Texas cowboy boots like yours, Majid, and we're going to induct him into the Texas Hall of Fame by the time this day is over. So thank you, Dr. Al-Naimi. And the reason that we are here is also because I was with the ambassador of Qatar, and there's a very special iftar that's held at a friend's house named Ray Mahmoud, and he had me stand up and tell the story of how we begin to work. So I wound up sitting by Ambassador Al-Thani, and he said, "This happened in my country?" I said, "Yes, you were the first to stand beside us that provided the space." And he said, "Well, we have to do something else together again." And so that is why we are here today. That is how it started. I would also like to say thank you to Qatar. I work all over the world with many different nations, many different religions, and I work with many nations that are majority Muslim. And I love the philosophy of Qatar. Many people don't want to have conversations with people that are difficult, but you never move forward unless you have difficult conversations with people. And I'm a big believer in that. And Qatar is very unique in that. And I believe in that, and I support them. I would hate to imagine a Middle East and a world without Qatar. Qatar has actually been a blessing to my nation, because when we've had challenges with different countries, Qatar has been there for us to come to a space and talk and to be able to work it out. And the result of this work is we're now in 20 cities that represent over 200 congregations and 500,000 Americans. The result of this is last year that Rabbi David Saperstein, Imam Majid, and myself were invited to the White House and given a reward by President Biden. And we're excited about that, about the way that it's growing, the impact that it's having. It's now spread into 15 different countries where we are working. And already, as I've been here just for about a day, we've had other countries come up and say, we would love to have what you're doing around the world in our country. So we're excited about that. So what is the problem? What is the problem? We're living in a time of extremism. We're living in a time where we are polarized. Even in my country, we feel this. And we've seen extremism, but now we're seeing it in America, in my home. But here's the interesting thing. An extremist in America looks like me. They're white, they're Christian, and somehow or another, they begin to buy into the lies. They begin to buy into some of the crazy notions that they only know how the world should work. And I'm sorry to say that in my country, we've seen the growth of these extremist, white supremacist group that don't want to make room for anyone else. But as I read the Bible, it says that we are all created in the image of God. That means as a Christian, it means that as I look at you, what I see are people with the divine imprint of God upon you. And so I have to respect your rights. I have to stand up for your freedoms. I cannot ignore these things. So there is the challenge that we face. I love this verse in James. In James 3:18, it says that there is a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. All it means is this. When people come together to be peacemakers, all kinds of good stuff happens. And that's what I want us to do. I want us to work to build peace so that we can see all kind of good things that are taking place and happen. So what is the solution? 3 simple things. Number 1, we have to have relationships that bridges divides. Relationships that bridges divides. And so that's the whole point of what we do with pastors, imams, rabbis, and priests. We help them become friends where they know one another, where they can get to know one another, and in that intimacy, deal with very sensitive issues. The second thing is dialogue that leads to engagement. It's good to talk. It's good to know where the differences are. But it's equally important to know, so what are we going to do about that? And then third, there have to be processes and tools that build civil society and citizenship. Those are the 3 things we're going to do our best to do at this conference. So don't think of this at a conference where we're going to come and just listen to a lot of lectures. We are. But we're going to constantly think about what is the practical outcome of this? What are we going to do with this? How are we going to move forward? And so the plan is to bring top down and bottom up together. A lot of times you have the elites that talk, the educated, the universities, the government leaders, the lawyers, and this is good. We need the framework that they develop. But it's disconnected from the grassroots. And the grassroots represent the clerics, the pastors, the imams, the rabbis, the priests that need to somehow or another bridge that, because if you have the laws, but you don't have the people working together, you're not going anywhere. So we have to bridge that. We have to pull the 2 together. So we'll have a session in just a moment that'll start for the next day and a half, and it'll be primarily pastors, imams, rabbis. There'll be many of you that have come from 5 cities in America, in triads, pastors, imams, and rabbis. You're already here with us. It'll be pastors and imams from Qatar and other parts around the world. We've already met some of you from Burkina Faso and many other countries. And so we'll meet in a room together and we'll go through that. And we'll meet in a room right behind this. Then there's another room that's on this side right behind me where scholars, academics, legal people will explain what is the rule of law, how does it work. And so we encourage you to be with that group. It's okay to stick your head in one another's group, but I also want to encourage you, the group that is designed for you, do your best to stay with that group, because each lecture and each session is building to another session, and we'll do that together. So we're excited about that, and I want to thank you for coming as we put those pieces together. So come with a mindset that you're going to learn. Come with a mindset that something good is going to happen. I mean, we've got it all in this room. We've got government leaders, we have academics, we have legal people. We also have pastors, imams, and philanthropists. We ought to be able to do a whole lot of good in this room. Thank you for coming today.
والآن مع كلمة الإمام محمد ماجد المؤسس المشارك لشبكة الجيران متعددة الأديان.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Give me a great pleasure to be with you this morning in this beautiful country. As my dear brother, Pastor Bob Roberts, have said, that we thank Dr. Ibrahim Naimi and his center for hosting the first dialogue and meeting of networking between American Muslims and Christians and the Jewish, and we have the brothers and sisters from Pakistan join us in that first meeting. Give me great pleasure because the two organizations, the Center, Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue and Multi-Faith Neighbor Network, coming together, and this gathering represents actually those two organizations, because Doha Center is international, and I see people from around the world in this gathering here today, because the fact that there is no religion in the world today is majority all the time. We have majority religion in one part of the world and minority in another part of the world. And our model is that to have the majority always stand for the rights of citizens who are minority in that country. And the second aspect of the center is dialogue. You cannot start a relationship without dialogue. And in order for us to understand one another, we have to have humility. There's a verse in the Holy Quran, God Almighty says, يا أيها الناس إن خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Or God Almighty says, all humankind we have created from male and female, and that's Adam and Eve, for the Christians and the Jews in this room, and made you into two nations and tribes, so you may know one another. And the best among you are those who are the most righteous. For it begins with that understanding of the other. Very interesting, the word in Arabic of akh, which is brother, include the word akhar. The word akhar, the word akh and akhar are connected. The same thing, word brother and the other. For we have to see the other person is our brothers and our sisters. The other aspect of this is the issue of multi-faith. You may ask yourself why you call it multi-faith. Because as Dr. Naimi have said, that we do not believe in melting the faith. It's multi-faith, not melting the faith. That we believe that everyone have to have a right to practice the religion the way it sees fit, and respecting the rights of others. We're not creating one global religion. And evangelical Christian will not have like that, and I'm quite sure my brothers and sisters from the Jewish community will not have like that. And the other aspect of it is neighborhood. That's why we have grassroots movement. And we create a network of this grassroots movement around the world. Let me give you two examples of the impact of this work, or three examples. In America, in Washington, Seattle, there's a mosque was attacked by a person misinformed about Islam, and they burned out the mosque. While the mosque was on fire, the pastor, one of the pastors joined us on this kind of work, came to the imam with the key of their own church, handed over to the imam, says, you can use our church. Our church is yours. Thank you. Yes, you can give them clap. You can clap for them, for the imam and the pastor. And the second example is when we had a crisis, hostage crisis in Texas, where an extremist person came and took the rabbi in that synagogue hostages and his congregation. And Bob and the imam from Texas, they went there, prayed all night, and God Almighty protected that community, and the community was saved. The same thing that the church, there's a church was attacked in Texas, and the Muslim created fund, raised fund money, and gave it to multi-faith so we can give it to that church. Therefore, it's not about just having dialogue, but to walk the talk and to act upon our principles, to protect our neighbors, the neighbors being Christians and Muslims or Buddhists or Hindu or maybe no religion. We have to be there for them. The last thing I want to say, as we gather here today, that there's business people on the corporate network, the business people, there's the government people. Our model is to have in every city the pastors, the imam and the rabbi and their congregations and the local business and local government work together to stand for the rights of everyone in that community and to work together to build the community. We're going to talk more about our model, the head and the hand, and working together in social services in our community, and there are so many models and examples happen in America during the pandemic. I will ask God Almighty to bless this gathering and to have us to walk away from this gathering with more commitment to help and to change the world and to bring about tranquility and peace to the world. Thank you so much.
والآن نبدأ معا جلسات المؤتمر. وقبل الجلسة الأولى نبدأ معا بجلسة تمهيدية موضوعها تجارب إصلاحية واقعية تجاه الحرية الدينية. فاسمحوا لي بدعوة السادة المتحدثين فيها، وهم الدكتور جان فيغل والدكتور كريس سيبو.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It is good to be here. I am also the facilitator of the first group, so let me make a brief comment about that before providing some framing comments. Our group is on religion and the rule of law, as Dr. Bob and Imam Majid mentioned. The first day, we're going to look at the big picture. What are the trends in the world that are going on that we have to account for? How do we think about dignity? How do we think about peace building? And then tomorrow, we will talk about how does religious freedom fit into that larger context, thinking about things like how do you conceptualize and advance religious freedom? How does religious freedom relate to the rest of human rights? How do we consider special issues that are challenges in different places around the world, like registration or blasphemy or gender equity? So that is the role of the first group, and I would encourage you to come to ours. It will be more fun, for sure. But as Bob mentioned, try to stick to your groups, but get a sense for the other group. We're the top-down group. The other group, the imams and pastors, are the bottom-up group, but of course both have to be informed by the other. So poke your head in the opposite groups, stick to your groups, and have some fun doing so. The organizers were kind enough to ask me and Jan Figel to provide some framing comments about this conference, for me to speak on pluralism, illustrating it a little bit with some of our experiences in Uzbekistan, and then Jan to make some comments about dignity. So let me begin by saying this. I am grateful to be back in Doha. I love this country. I love the hospitality. I've been here, I think, 6 times since 2005, and every experience has been one of warm hospitality and just simply great people. The other thing that I would say, and take the bold move of speaking on behalf of all global citizens everywhere, I would like to thank Qatar for hosting the World Cup. Now, the World Cup didn't work out the way we wanted it to for Qatar and the United States, and basically everybody else besides Argentina. But we are grateful for the opportunity to compete. This is why we compete. We love soccer and to see who's the best this year. As someone who has played soccer his whole life through school and into college, I love the game. I can't get enough of it. And I think that there are two things that the game of soccer or football teach us. One is to see the whole, and then the second is how to relate differences, the diversity of different positions that are occupied by different players from different backgrounds and faiths, how to bring them together in a cohesive manner that enables them to win. This is what we're trying to do. So I think in many ways that is why we're here. We want to see the whole, and we want to work together across deep difference and build a social cohesion that allows our countries to have equal citizenship for all people and all faiths or none. Now, one framework for talking about this idea is pluralism. There are many different definitions of pluralism, so I want to share with you mine. First of all, pluralism is not the presence of difference. That is diversity. Diversity is the presence of difference. Pluralism is the engagement of difference, as Bob said and Imam Majid said as well. This kind of pluralism is a covenant, a pledge, an obligation to not only engage one another, but to respect and protect one another. We do so because while we may not respect the beliefs and or resulting behavior of our neighbor and their beliefs, we must respect their inherent dignity because we believe they were made by God. It's that simple. This kind of pluralism is like the beginning of a marriage. You're probably wondering, when does a marriage begin? Well, I have an answer. Marriage, I think, begins when you realize that the person walking the path of life next to you is not you. When you realize that you are not called to project your ideas and actions about how life should be done onto the other. This same dynamic is true within families. It's true among majority cultures and non-majority cultures within any state in our world today, between great powers and regional powers. Nobody likes to have the view of one projected onto the other. The other must be seen equally with their own views and their own values. It's just as simple as that. So how do we avoid this mistake? Well, we have to see the whole. We have to learn together, to work together across deep difference at the invitation of the other, even as we remember that every country has its own path to pluralism. We can't expect another country to act like our own country, but we can expect them to operate according to these values that we are all sharing. So seeing the whole and engaging across religions and races and regions, 3 R's there, demands another 3 R's. And I want to speak on these 3 R's and then illustrate them through the example that my family and my country have had with Uzbekistan. And that's how I'll conclude. Religious freedom, freedom of conscience or belief, I think it's the cornerstone of civilization itself. Without the freedom to choose, there is no dignity to our societies. There's a top-down and a bottom-up dimension to religious freedom in a society and with a state. The top-down of government must ensure that all citizens are not only educated about, but protected in their right to make choices, to include how they believe, especially how they believe. The bottom-up of the grassroots, and especially faith communities, is to ensure that citizens exercise their choices responsibly. Top-down, bottom-up. One without the other is unsustainable. The second R is relational diplomacy, which is also known sometimes as cross-cultural religious literacy. This is not just about the what of engagement, but the how of engagement. It involves the competencies and skills to understand your neighbor as they understand themselves, not as social media tells you to understand them. You have to understand them as they understand themselves. Understand what is different about their beliefs, not to demean them, but to dignify them by understanding the essence of their own identity. The third R is the rule of law. It seeks to see every citizen of a country equal before and accountable to a transparent and integrated legal system. But it's much more than a legal perspective, at least in my mind. It is also about believing in the law and the beliefs behind the law, that the law is good, that the law is moral, as the American lawyer Harold Berman suggested across his long career. Or more simply, we might say this, as I quote John Adams, one of the founders of my country, the United States of America, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." I think this idea, this statement from John Adams is true about most countries around the world, irrespective of whatever religious traditions are there. Why? Because character matters. The character of citizens matter, and because such virtues as humility, integrity, empathy, patience, among others, are common to all of our traditions, and they must inform the law for it to be real, credible, and relevant to all citizens. So let me conclude by sharing with you a story about Uzbekistan, again, of my own family and the country and friends of Uzbekistan who are very, very dear to me. 24 years ago, in 1999, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom called in the Ambassador of the Republic of Uzbekistan over to the State Department. There was some concerns about Uzbekistan, not specifically about the registration of certain religions that were minorities in that context. As traditional diplomacy sometimes demands, the Americans essentially threatened the Uzbeks with sanctions. If you don't make these changes, then we will have to have sanctions. The sanctions were made, and the places were registered. So this was the American talking to the Uzbek and doing traditional diplomacy. Now, there was a relational dimension to it as well. Relational diplomacy suggests that you get to know somebody behind the positions according to their own interests and their own values. That American ambassador in 1999 was my father, Robert Seipel. The ambassador from Uzbekistan at the time was Sadiq Safayev, and my father introduced me to Sadiq because I happened to be writing my dissertation on United States-Uzbekistan relations. And Sadiq invited me to his country, invited me to meet his friends in that country. And because of that invitation and because of the dissertation, I was able to speak to many people across the country and build trust with them as I tried to tell their story, as they understood it and as the Americans understood it. So this built a lot of trust. Many years later, I was the president of the Institute of Global Engagement, and we tried to engage Uzbekistan on religious freedom. This was hard to do, and it was difficult, and they were not open to us engaging, in part because the United States had designated Uzbekistan a country of particular concern. It had put Uzbekistan on its own list of religious freedom violations. But the relationships remained. In 2016, a new president came to Uzbekistan and things began to change. And because of these relationships, my previous organization, the Institute for Global Engagement, was invited to sign a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with Uzbekistan, with the president of Uzbekistan's Institute for Strategic and Regional Studies. That was signed by James Chen, who is in the room here from the Institute of Global Engagement. The MOU was signed in September of 2018, and witnessing that was Bob Roberts and other folks in the room, Sam Brownback, who's not here today but is coming back, Wade Cusack, who is in the room, and Imam Talib. They were all there in September of 2018. The MOU called for training programs in the rule of law and relational diplomacy. From the top down, what would eventually happen was there would be the first ever religion and rule of law certificate programs in November of 2019 and May of 22. There was also the first, from the bottom up, the first ever clerical relationship building programs between imams and pastors, rooted in the experience here in Qatar from DICID that ever took place in Uzbekistan. So this was amazing. The rule of law programs, by the way, were organized by the Brigham Young University, a religious organization that is represented here today by Brett Scharfs. And as the link between the top down and the bottom up, we saw two more certificate programs, or programs in general. One was a program on relational diplomacy, how to engage, how to understand the other as they see themselves. And in 2019 and again in 22, we saw the first ever, I think this is true, religious freedom roundtables in Uzbekistan. That was Greg Mitchell, who was here in the room, helped orchestrate working with Uzbekistan. So that's the relational diplomacy part. The third R is the rule of law. I've already spoken about that, but let me just add one thing. On 9 November 2019, the Uzbekistan National Security Council invited Americans to come speak with them for 3 hours to talk about their religion law. How many countries in the world would invite somebody to come talk to them about it when there were significant disagreements? The Americans thought there didn't need to be a law, but if there's a law, here's what we think. The Uzbeks thought there needed to be a law, and here's what they think. And they had a conversation, and there was disagreement, but that's what friends do, who are in relationship with one another. Last week, I was in Uzbekistan with my friend Davranbek Maksudov, who is the deputy chair of the Committee for Religious Affairs in Uzbekistan. And we had a very nice dinner about how the law must reflect the values of the people and the different traditions in the country. So let me conclude by saying this. We need change. Even if it's to be sustainable, it has to have these 3 R's. It requires people who see the whole and who have the relational diplomacy to build bridges and especially trust among different people. Qatar and DICID have been doing this from the beginning. May of 2023 is the 16th anniversary of the founding of DICID, and Qatar diplomacy has been leading the way and instrumental in many successful diplomatic initiatives around the world. In fact, Qatar just opened an embassy in Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan. So, let me say this finally, our co-organizers themselves embody this top-down and bottom-up approach. Dr. Al-Naimi, he's the head of a think tank that brings together citizens to talk about these issues. He's also the Deputy Minister of Education. Bob Roberts is a pastor who leads a network of pastors, grassroots around America, but he also engages ambassadors in Washington, D.C. Rabbi Saperstein had the same kind of think tank that he led for his denomination for many years, but he was then from the bottom up, but then he was the ambassador at large for religious freedom under President Obama. And then my dear, dear friend Imam Majid, who is the pastor, the imam of the largest mosque in America, but he's also, from the top down, a member of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. So these people embody these values with each other and how they organize themselves and are building on the traditions that Qatar has helped initiate back with the ambassadors of peace. So we encourage conversations that are fun and frank, candid, and courteous, that are unafraid to talk about any issue, because that's what friends do. And with that, let me invite Jan Figel to the floor to speak about dignity. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. Thank you, Chris. Honorable audience. First of all, my expression of gratitude for invitation and hospitality to the organizers, especially Bob Roberts and Dr. Al-Naimi, Imam Majid. This is for me first visit to Qatar in the city, to meet the people in full, not only at the airport, where I traveled a lot. And I accepted this invitation with a lot of understanding that these two notions, freedom and responsibility, are not usually used at the titles, but this title is very correct, very precise. And the base for freedom and responsibility of you and me and us is my dignity, because dignity is putting together our rights and our duties, not just one, not just half. And Chris invited me to frame together with him this debate. I would like to speak on three relatively short but important points. One is religious freedom, the other one is religious responsibility, and the third one is human dignity. We have problems around religious freedom. There are, of course, multiple attacks and violations, severe pressure against religious freedom worldwide. One source of this problem, or root of this problem, one, is misunderstanding, kind of misinterpretation of religious freedom. Some say it is only for religious people. Some say that religion is source of conflicts, of problems, even divisions in society. And therefore, religion and rule of law is an important connection, because we need to understand what we are speaking about and what we defend, what we advocate through law. Freedom of religion or belief must be understood as freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, because this is law, international law. Actually, this is the language used in Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 18, and the same article in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So even from the scope of numbers, 30 articles, number 18 is very central right, a human right, because it's central issue of personal conviction, lifestyle, base of cultural and spiritual life, identity, principle of belonging, of relation, religare, to the community of like-minded. And it speaks, this concept of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, about forum internum, which is absolute freedom, my thought, my conscience, and forum externum. I live this outside with the others. And this is very sensitive, this connection between internum and externum, because externum can be restricted, of course. Limits of my freedom, for example, starts with freedom of the others. I'm at the court in Strasbourg, Jan Figel versus Slovak Republic, my beloved country, on the repetitive ban on public worship during pandemics. The case was submitted 2021, and now it was accepted and will be dealt with. It's a precedent for my country and for the whole European continent. I'm glad to represent here at least Central Europe and Europe at this gathering, because I think there is a lot to learn from, not only in positive, also in negative, but to learn together on future crises, future epidemics or pandemics or whatever comes tomorrow. And vigilance is important for rule of law. If we don't care, we will lose what we have. Freedom of religion or belief, of course, is multifold, because it speaks about observance, about worship, about teaching, in private or in public. In private or in public. Faith is a not private thing. It's personal, but not private. Then about living faith individually and in community. Very important distinction and connection. freedom of religion or belief as a litmus test, substantial criterion for all human rights. Because if this most inner freedom is not respected by state, by the power, how can we expect respect of freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of property, if this most inner freedom is not respected? And why I say it here, because it's very important to understand that for freedom of religion or belief is important for people from A to Z, for atheists up to Zoroastrians, even for atheists, because they need freedom of thought, of conscience. And therefore this clear understanding of religious freedom means a lot for living this freedom in practice. And I want to say again that it all starts even with these principles, because the first article of Universal Declaration speaks about human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And the second sentence is very crucial. They are endowed with reason, conscience, and should behave one to other in spirit of brotherhood. Here, brotherhood is used in secular language, in secular text. But brotherhood is very important as a response to our equal dignity. And in Quran, you know it very well, either we are brothers in faith or in humanity, but brothers. And it means something. And in Bible, love your neighbor. So simple. I want to say that there is kind of another misunderstanding that many experts today, professors, academics, speaks about belief, freedom of belief, and they tend to push religion aside or into privacy. There is triune dimension of human person. Homo rationalis, homo moralis, and homo religiosus. My rationality, morality, and religiosity is interconnected, intertwined. It is not separable. 3 dimensions, but they are in one person, one unity. And what is the reality in the 21st century? Pew Research Center is frequently quoted. I will just say that almost 80% of people in the world live in countries where religious freedom has high or very high obstacles, restrictions. Intensity of these restrictions are going from intolerance through discrimination to persecution and up to genocide, which is crime of crimes. There are either governmental restrictions, mostly visible, or social hostilities. This is about Christians in Nigeria, Uyghurs in China, Rohingyas in Myanmar, and many other minorities worldwide, as was mentioned already. If one minority is persecuted, other minorities may follow. And Martin Luther King was precise, saying, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Hundreds of millions of people do not enjoy religious freedom in full. And therefore, my first point is we need global religious freedom movement. Movement where like-minded governments, parliamentarians, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, and of course religious leaders work together towards more humane century, more humane world. It is possible. It is about such kind of conferences, awareness raising, appeals, education. I used to repeat, and I will say it for the first time here in Qatar, allies of evil are very active. We can see it everywhere. And they are simple. It's ignorance, indifference, and fear. If we don't care, if we don't know, and if we are scared to do something, to say something, we need to promote allies of common good. Engagement, Chris mentioned it, education for all, and simple, important, decisive human courage. Human courage to say something, to do something on behalf of those who are defenseless or voiceless. And we need global religious freedom movement like we see from International Religious Freedom Summits, IRF roundtables, International Religious Freedom and Belief Alliance, G20 now having Interfaith Forum, but also Religion 20 Forum, regional religious meetings like this one here in Qatar. On responsibility, secondly, when I met religious leaders, whether Grand Imam or Pope Francis or Pope Tawadros or patriarchs or Dalai Lama, chief rabbis, I always dwelt on responsibility, not only speaking about freedom, as this was my competence as EU Special Envoy for Religious Freedom, but also second side of the same coin is responsibility of millions of believers to do something, And I think that crisis can be defined also as a lack of maturity, lack of balance. And this is about connection between freedom and responsibility, between rights and duties. We all know that Microsoft, Meta, or Google have corporate social responsibility. We have to promote religious social responsibility of huge communities. Muslims and Christians, Jews, Abrahamic family represent majority of global population. And if majority cares for peace, there will be visible change for better, I'm sure, if majority cares. People don't read much religious documents, fatwas or encyclicals, but they see images. They see, for example, a Grand Imam and Pope Francis together in Abu Dhabi signing a document on human fraternity. It's important. And this is cause for our religious responsibility to make 21st century more humane. And the last point I was invited for, and sorry, speaking a bit more, but it is about nexus, interdependence between religious freedom and human dignity. Father Nuncio knows that one of major documents of Catholic Church on religious freedom adopted in the Council 1965 is called Dignitatis Humanae. So there is really a nexus. Human dignity is immeasurable worth of each person, human person. Understanding of Abrahamic three religions on human dignity is very deep. It's biblical Imago Dei, Medaber al-Kavod, and Quranic Karamach, where angels are asked to bow down to Adam. So there it is clear. But also secular documents, like already mentioned, Universal Declaration of Human Rights or European Charter of Fundamental Rights, start with dignity. There are more than 160 constitutions in the world today mentioning dignity. This is the fruit of most inhumane Second World War. It came after Second World War. And now we need, I think, to understand more deeply and live in respect of dignity in order to bring more humane times. Human dignity has three dimensions: me, thee, we. I am authentic, original, specific. Nobody can replace me if my living, my creativity is not implemented, fulfilled, nobody will replace it. Secondly, "the" means my freedom ends where your freedom starts. But I need somebody to be happy. Everybody needs somebody. Le chemin le plus court de moi à moi, c'est l'autre. I need somebody to know who I am. If I'm isolated island, I will never be happy, and I will never know myself. And the third dimension is we. We all live in a community, starting with family, and we all have duty towards community we live in to become happy and fulfill our life and sense of life. So if we see these conflicts, wars, and polarization mentioned by Bob and others, we need to dig deeper. And dig deeper means we are all equal in dignity, but we are all different in identity. That's principle. That's not the problem. And this ethical principle of equal dignity should be translated very clearly in real terms into equal citizenship, fair and inclusive citizenship. So the last point on dignity, we adopted a few years ago Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity for Everyone, Everywhere. It was good, successful, hundreds of signatories are there. I invite you to join. And now I invite you, with so many friends, to support diplomatic initiative to declare UN Human Dignity Day, possibly this year in New York, September General Assembly. Thank you very much for your attention. I took more time because it's important, and I wish you a successful conference. All the best to you. Shukran Jazir.
We're going to dismiss. We will start back promptly at 11:30 in 10 minutes. If you're pastor, imam, rabbi, the room this direction, right behind this wall. If you're religion, rule of law, the room directly behind this screen. Thank you for your attention. There's some desserts, refreshments out in the hallway. Thank you.